Hello everybody, this is Ryan over at High Carb Regenerator. Welcome back to my channel. Today is the pain video that I had talked about the Sunday before everything happened. So here it is. I wanted to do an intro first just to say that this is very foot heavy. So it's probably not exactly what you expected, but I truly believe that the feet is where everything starts. So be sure to watch the entire thing just to get everything in your head. Think about it, mull it over. This isn't a sales pitch. This is not a sponsored video. This is just something that I have learned ever since having foot surgery, or maybe even before that. It's something that I have dealt with and I have noticed and I have seen in others for years now. And a lot of this channel is probably going to be, I think it's going to be a 50-50 between mobility and diet whenever I can figure out how exactly to film the whole mobility thing. But this is very important because I noticed that my digestion has gotten a lot better with mobility. And it's because of what I'm talking about in this video. So, and there's going to be a couple spots in here that don't have sound. It's on purpose. There's a lot of copyrighted music in some of these video segments, and I figure the video is really what you needed to see. So I cut the sound out. I don't think I'm going to voice it over because the spots really aren't that long. So if you do see some sound go out, it's just because I had to cut it. Anyway, I think that's about it. So here's the video. Hello everybody. I finally am getting around to making the video about pain. I know it took a little bit longer than I expected, but I had a lot of stuff happening last week. So why do I have the foot up here? This is going to be a long video, by the way, probably going to be a long video. So you might have to come back to it or just, bookmark it or whatever. But this is going to be a long video more than likely. So why do you have pain and why do I have a foot up here? So I wanted to kind of explain why I have this foot up here. I've got a bunch of stuff here and I've actually got an entire other version of this. So there's quite a bit to go through. But the reason that I have the foot up here is because the foot is actually obviously everybody knows this, but the foot is the first contact with the ground. The foot is basically how your body knows where it's walking. It knows what it's doing, and it sends a signal up to the hips, the knees, and the back and everything to know where it needs to be, how it needs to land, and everything like that. Okay, so here's a little explanation of it. It contains a lot of moving parts, 26 bones, 33 joints, and over 100 ligaments. Such a complexity is necessary because the foot is required to do many different activities such as walking, running, climbing. Between them, the 2 feet need to balance your body weight, redistribute it in response to position changes. Okay. So keep that in mind and think about the foot when you're landing in really padded shoes or shoes of any kind. What is it? Because what it's supposed to be doing is it's supposed to be doing touching the ground, sensing the ground, and knowing where it is. Now, it really can't do that when you are in shoes. So I'm going to get started here. I didn't really watch this video. I'm actually only really here for this diagram. So you can see and another thing is when you're in shoes, what happens is you can see the heel here is exaggerated, right? And it exaggerates your knee, and it pushes your knee forward, and it pushes your hips forward, and it pushes your back backwards. And all of a sudden, you're in a terrible position, and or it can do this, or you lean back too much. Where C is exactly where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be completely straight up and down. D is another thing. You can either So in this one, the knees are going backwards, the ass is going backwards, and the front of the body is kind of going forward. So let's watch this video for a second and see what she's got to say.
All right. So I've brought with me 2 sort of practical high heels, meaning that there's probably 2 inches. And I want to put the high heels in the context of standing. There are a lot of myths that heels make you slouch less and improve your posture, but I think that's a little dubious. So, first things first, you can notice that this lumbar sacral curve checks out and I want to slump. In order to compensate, I instead back bend, which is not really good. So I'm creating extra opening here.
It also completely tightens up your Achilles,
which makes me look taller and makes my chest look bigger, but that's not really the point. Then when we add the asymmetrical stance, it's really tough to balance because it turns out you're balancing on chopsticks. So what happens is if you bend your knees, it's like you're getting ready to fight someone and you choose one leg that you lean on and you choose the other. Not a great idea. If you turn out one, you are most likely going to lock the knee and lean on one side, and that's where the bowl comes back. We've got my left hip, which looks like your right hip lifting, or the sassy right hip. If we come back to the third position, same issue. When people stand in high heels, men and women, you generally lock your knees so that you have something.
and high heels can be anything. It could be 16 millimeter, athletic shoe.
Stable. When you're not wearing heels, you don't have to lock your heel or your knees because your foot is on something stable and dependable. So when we factor in that, I'm either in the fighting stance or I'm locking my knees, flattening out my low back, and leaning onto one side, which is creating that pelvic asymmetry. Same thing when I turn out this way. This is actually the least comfortable for me personally because this inner side of my foot, the bunion zone as I like to call it, is being smushed. My knees get super pressure from the heels. And my hips aren't happy because this whole area is getting adaptively tight. So then, when you add an instrument.
Okay, this isn't about musical instruments, but keep in mind this, and then all of a sudden, you've got dislocated hips. Now, you might not have a fully dislocated hip, but a lot of people complain about hip pain, they complain about sciatic pain, they complain about all the lower, body, in the mid-body pains, and they can't figure out why. And another thing that happens is when you are in any of these anything but C position, you are then starting to form slouching, in some kind of manner. None of it looks right. This is good. I don't even know how he's achieving that with shoes, but the shoes aren't too padded. Again, here we go. So your body forms an X, right? Your body operates on an X. It is supposed, this is not the X that you operate on, but there's an X. So the abdominals and the ass and the lower back and the quads basically are supposed to work in unison when you are in the right position. And here they're working exactly the way they're supposed to be. But here they are not. So now this is not always going to happen because of your shoes. It's going to happen because you're staring at your phone, you're staring at your laptop, you're staring at whatever, you're slouched in your chair, whatever it is. But eventually this becomes your normal position. You've got way too tight pecs and your back is just completely weak. And that's what happens. And then it starts sending your head forward. And the reason that I'm talking about this is because I have it. Now, I started developing it because the doctors were always trying to put me in corrective footwear, which I'm going to get to later. Here we go you can see how slouched she is and how normal she is here. Now, this is pretty exaggerated, but I just wanted to point this out. So your head normally weighs 10 to 12 pounds on average. But if you lean 15 degrees forward, it's 27 pounds. So can imagine how much more force that's putting on your shoulders, your back, your neck, and everything. And then everybody wonders why, and then you're forward, you're convex or whatever. Your posture starts going forward and your pecs start getting tighter and tighter and tighter because they're trying to hold this, and your upper back starts getting weaker, and mid back starts getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And so eventually you get a lot of headaches. Your shoulders are always in pain, your back's always in pain. Everybody's always complaining about how bad their back hurts. And they can't figure out why. You know, they can't figure out what the reason for this is, and the reason is your position from the beginning, the beginning of the chain, which is your feet, is in the wrong position because your heels are raised, and your knees are out of place, your hips are out of place, your back is out of place, and then your body's trying to compensate for that. Your head's going forward, and all of a sudden you're in pain 24 hours a day, and you can't figure out why. So here we go. Let's go with this video.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ray McClanahan here at Northwest Foot and Ankle. Going to shoot a really short video for you guys today on behalf of Correct Toes and Healthy Foot Alliance. We're going to talk today about a feature built into most foot.
This is the type of shoe that the doctors were always trying to put me in. Now, I'm going to talk about barefoot running and stuff like that. And I'm going to talk about the company that I like at the end. This really isn't an infomercial. This is really just like an enlightenment that I've had this year, basically. And the proper mobility has actually allowed my digestion to start working too. So if you're bloated, chances are that your digestion is stagnant because it's just not being moved like it's supposed to.
Footwear, especially athletic footwear, known as toe spring. Toe spring is the upward deflection of the toe box of most athletic shoes.
And have you ever seen your foot just do that? Do your feet ever just kind of lift off the ground like that?
Shoes. The ball of the foot resides in this area. The ends of the toes are typically going to be between 20 and 25 degrees in the air. If you put the shoe on a flat surface, you'll see what we're referring to. A long time ago, when shoes were made out of very stiff materials and had stiff soles, people that built shoes found out that if they made the shoe completely flat and it was stiff and it didn't bend here, people would trip on the shoe and they would fall and they would hurt themselves. So a long time ago, there was a little bit of legitimate reason for using toe spring. More recently, however, it has been increasingly added into athletic shoes with the idea that it is helping us to roll through our gait pattern and it somehow enhances our gait. The downside of holding our toes above the support surface for any period of time is the muscles on the front of the calf, known as the anterior muscles, also known as the
are constantly flexed. I mean, constantly flexed.
Extensor group, send tendons to the very last toe bone on each of our toes. And when we hold our toes above the ball of the foot like this, those toe tendons learn that and then they start to become tight. Now that's negative for a lot of different reasons. That's negative because that's the beginning of hammer toes, when the toe tendons start to pull the toes up and the toes will begin to stay like that. It's also extremely negative because when the toes are held above the support surface, the fat pad that is supposed to be sitting under the ball of the foot then resides in an area we call the sulcus, and that's an area of the foot that you're not bearing any weight on, so your fat is not helping you in that position. Plenty of people go to a foot care provider and they're told they're losing their fat pad, when in reality their fat pad went a little too far forward because the toe tendons pulled the toes up.
Yeah, so that's bad all the way around. I mean, I'm going to try to remember to link all these videos so you can watch it. I did want to look at the anatomy of a foot and somebody who never wore shoes and somebody who does wear shoes. So this is another thing that happens in high heels. Now, these are some ancient photographs here, but look, I mean, this almost looks like a hand. This almost looks like a hand. Look at this thing. This is a foot. You know, when I used to work at this place called Whitehall Post Office in Pennsylvania, there, East Pennsylvania, we used to get a lot of people from different parts of Africa, actual Africa, and different parts of India. There was a lot of people from India, and a lot of these places, they didn't have shoes, whether they could afford it or they just didn't see the need. And so when they come over here, none of the footwear fit them, so they had to wear like the loop sandals, you know, that you usually see people after like athletic meet wear. Because, and even then, their foot didn't fit in there. Their feet were so big and so muscular and so articulated that they couldn't even get them in shoes. And here is, so can you imagine when you are landing on this, nothing is landing the way it's supposed to. So it's hitting the knees wrong. It's hitting the hips wrong. It's hitting the low back wrong. And this is extremely exaggerated. But it's really not, because most even running shoes are pointed like this. I mean, look at a baby's feet. Does that look like that? No.
secretly killing you? That is the question that we're going to ponder today. Coach Nate from the Running Experience. Unless you've been living underneath the box, you've seen the high stack height, high cushion shoes take the running world by storm. You know, originally popularized by Hoka, but now every brand has some maker model that hits that category, and it's really
and everybody talks about their hips need to, you know, their knees are just destroyed. Yeah, your knees are destroyed from the shoes you've been wearing. There is literally no claim whatsoever. No shoe company has ever claimed that their shoe lessens injuries. It's legally not possible because they know it's not true.
been taking a lot of runners.
And so people are in these crazy thick, like 4-inch shoes. And it's making it, your foot is, so what happens when you're in shoes with padding is your foot tries to walk harder and harder and harder to try to feel the ground, because that's what it's built to do. And then you put your shoe in 4 inches of padding and it's walking harder and harder and harder. And the reason your knees aren't hurting anymore is because it's walking so hard, but it can't feel the ground anymore. And it doesn't have that jarring, as much of a jarring effect, but your hips are still completely out of place.
To further distances, places they've never gone before. It's made running pain-free, more accessible to more
It's because people don't land on their foot right.
people, and that's that experience they get when they first get in the shoe. But are there some problems with these things, and are they actually holding us back in some ways? That's what we're going to get into next. Now, before we go any further, we need to talk about
Look at this. Even this shoe has that toe raise.
force plates. Now, force plates are something that researchers in a lab use to measure the amount of impact and force going into the ground when you walk over it or you run over it. And you better believe that anytime shoes are involved, there's some sort of force plate research that happens with measuring how much impact occurs in different levels of shoes. And believe it or not, in these maximalist higher cushion shoes, runners are striking the ground with greater degrees of force than they are in other shoes. And this leads us to this interesting.
Your heel's not even supposed to be the one that hits the ground anyways. And he just said what I was just talking about, harder and harder, because your foot is trying to feel the ground.
Conundrum. I'm in this shoe that is more comfortable and giving me a little bit more cushion and support, but my body is striking the ground harder, and you better believe that force is going somewhere. Now, there's a few roles that shoes have traditionally served for us. One has been protection, warmth, but in the running world, what we're looking for is some sense of stability and also some sense of cushioning. And stability and cushioning, my friends, are not the same thing. When my foot is just bare and I can hit
Look at how narrow, look at how jacked up his toe is.
the ground, I can
It's not supposed to look like that.
get an immediate feel for the ground, and I can find that sense of stability pretty darn quick. And when I start adding cushioning to it, I actually start to raise my foot further off the ground, and my body has to like hunt for that stability.
I'm going to take a picture of my feet, ugly as they are, and I'm going to put it right here.
And it has to push through that cushion to try to find it. So all of a sudden, when I get into a thicker and thicker shoe, my body has to hit, my foot has to hit the ground harder.
And his Achilles are tight. See, this is another thing that happens when you're in shoes with any kind of raised heel. Your Achilles gets really tight. You should not be squatting like this. Let's look up an Asian person squatting. Oops. Look at this. I mean, these people effortlessly squat. This is what your squat should look like. Feet fully on the ground. And this dude, I mean, this is exactly what happens in footwear.
To generate that sense of stability that.
And the reason, and then what happens is the entire posterior chain, which is your back, is tight because of this. It doesn't loosen. And that causes lower back pain because it tugs at the lower back. That's basically the fulcrum of where everything hits. It hits at the lower back and it pulls everything in different places and you're all over the place.
That it normally likes. So that's why that cushioning can be kind of counterintuitive and counterproductive in the respect of actually cushioning that blow. And the reason why this is important too is that that impact in our body is going somewhere. You better believe that just this little extra strip of rubber.
This is where Durianrider, I know I keep interrupting. This is where Durianrider and I completely disagree. He talks about these Nike Vapor or whatever the hell they are. That is the dumbest idea. If you had somebody who had trained their entire life in bare feet, they are going to smoke you every time because their running is effortless.
Is, taking all running pain away. Now, my other major bugaboo with these maximalist shoes is that they deaden our feet. We lose that sense of connection with the ground. As I just talked about, we start hitting the ground harder, but it allows us to run with form that's not as good. And all of a sudden, we're just perpetuating movement patterns that are just a little slow and sloppy, and we're cementing those in over time so that in certain respects, we can become less of a proficient, efficient, strong, connected runner, which if you've been on our channel at any time, we have some issues and problems with that. And this is very important for the category of runner who's been dealing with some sort of pain, puts these shoes on, and all of a sudden, that pain has gone away. And
that's another thing that drives me crazy. Runners especially will brag about how much pain they just ran in. Like that's intelligent in any capacity. It's like, oh, I just abused myself as best I could, man. Did 7 miles.
Question that I always ask to them is, did you really solve the problem of the pain in the first place? Or did you just kick that can down the road 3 months or 6 months or a year until you really have to deal with it? Now, believe it or not, I do think that these are very powerful tools that can and should be used by runners.
No.
I'm actually showing you the shoes that I run in weekly, so you know that I use these things too, but I want to talk about that next. Now, I spend as much time in the gym as I do out on the road running, and when I'm coaching athletes in the gym and they're lifting really heavy weights, sometimes they'll put a weightlifting belt on, this big leather strap that goes right around their torso that just creates some additional stability.
They should only use that at a lift meet. It's a dumb idea. I mean, or when you're trying for your 3 rep or your 1 rep max.
Around the spine so that when they hit heavier weights, they can do so safely and they can perform.
If you use, this isn't even about that, but I suppose it could be, because that's another thing. If you're using a weightlifting belt the entire workout, why? Why are you doing that? It's just like the dumbest thing. I see people doing it too.
And in my mind, these higher...
They want to say, well, my back hurts from blah, 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 blah. Yeah, deal with that first then,
Higher cushioned maximal shoes really perform the same thing for runners who are trying to do, instead of heavier weights, those longer distances and that greater amount of volume.
The Tarahumara, or however you pronounce their name, run for like 400 miles at one time. They wear sandals that are made out of tire rubber. Yeah.
But back to the weightlifter analogy, when they wear these belts, that's not a replacement for being obsessively focused on their squatting technique, working on and improving their mobility and their movement patterns. And if you see that lifter who's overly reliant on their belt, they actually are doing themselves a disservice because they're not teaching themselves how to stabilize. And with these shoes, it's got to be the same thing. So for as much time as you spend in a higher maximal cushion shoe, I want you to spend a lot of time, equal as much, in a lower stack height, more minimal shoe as well. So for example, when I ran my 50K a couple years ago, I spent a lot of time in the trail version, the Ultra Temps, higher cushion, higher stack height for those 3+ hour runs. But when I did my short runs, I tried to do something a little bit lower to the ground and a little bit softer. So I just had that foot feel.
To give an example, this shoe right here is actually after my surgery and after my foot was finally the new normal. This shoe right here that he's holding right here, this shoe right here, both of my feet were too wide to fit in this shoe. And they asked me, and I know I've said this in a few videos, not to try putting the shoe on any further because they could see that the shoe just was beyond. And I'm like, this is a fat joke, isn't it? And they're like, no. But my foot is so much wider than those shoes now, where the original owners of this company kind of, I was on a conference, a shoe conference. This is not about shoes either. This, like, I don't really care what you do with it. I'm just giving you the information. But this is where the pain starts. The pain starts at the feet, and then it radiates up. Now, is there other kind of pain? Of course. But I would say that a majority, especially the people who are on their feet a lot, this is where your pain is starting, because your body's trying to do all these different kind of things to try to compensate for it being out of place. But anyways, they would not let me try these shoes on.
And I got that foot strength. So use these shoes as the tools they are, but don't overly rely upon them and spend too much time on them either.
Okay, I'm going to stop that one in its track. Interestingly enough, he was talking about the caveman theory, and there was a study. I don't remember when it was. It was a little while ago, 2008. It might have even been before that. But the study examined 180 modern humans from 3 different population groups, comparing their feet to one another's, as well as the feet of 2,000-year-old skeletons. The research concluded that prior to the invention of the shoe, people had healthier feet. So it says, look, it's not your fault. It's your shoes. Shoes are bad. I don't just mean stilettos or cowboy boots or tottering, I don't know what the hell that is, or any other fairly obvious foot torture devices into which you are willingly jamming your feet. So the bottom line is, it is found that more cushioned shoes seems to result in greater impact loading when the wearer's foot hit the ground, leading to great risk of an injury like stress fracture. But even if you're not running, this is a lot about running. Even if you're not running, that is giving you micro fissures, micro fractions in your bones, in your feet, and all the way up. And this is causing you constant pain. And everybody wonders where it's coming from. And I'm trying just for the hell of it. I pulled this up. This is a running coach who's a barefoot runner. If you notice how much more movement his entire body has compared, I should bring that up when these people are running in this right here. Where is that part of the video? So if you watch, everybody's very stiff.
Increasingly more popular when marathon running was added to the Olympic Games in 1896. Manufacturers responded to this by trying to make footwear that was specific to the individual.
Look how much torture most of these people are in. And then watch somebody like this. This is actually the video I watched years ago. What happened to me is I was out in a pair of Brooks Beast, I think they were called, and it was basically this huge chunk of blob under my foot, and it started hurting so bad that I actually took the shoes off. I actually threw up, vomited, because I was in so much pain, and I'm like, I can't even walk in these damn things. I took them off, and I ran home barefoot effortlessly. It was I might have gotten a piece of glass in my foot or whatever it was, but it was effortless. I'm not into running, and I certainly can't do it now, but I tried because because of the overweight thing. And I'm like, oh, this is back in this, psycho days. You had calories in, calories out. And I'm over exercise and under eat.
What we discovered was that
But that's basically it in a nutshell. If you are not landing correctly, you are going to have pain somewhere in the body at some point because your body is all contorted. Your head is more forward or something. You know, you're going to be in one of these positions, slouch positions of some kind. And it's going to, you know, your front is going to get tighter and your back is going to get weaker. And it's not going to be, they're supposed to be an X basically, you know, like an X, you know, it's a cross section of your body. So you're supposed to be completely balanced and upright like this guy is. So anyway, I just pulled this up. I wanted to show people basically, here's a company that I use, and you can see where your feet are in these shoes. I'll link it down below. Check them out. But I also wanted to show people kind of what our feet used to look like, or still do if we're in an area where we don't wear. And then here's these kind of socks. I've used them. I'm over it. They're all right. But, you know, this is what happens to your feet when you start wearing barefoot shoes. And this is what happen to this person after wearing barefoot shoes. And there you go. That's the video. I'll send it back, and hopefully it did you some good. Hello. One last thing that I wanted to point out is if you look at any barefoot shoe, whether it has Vivo or X0, there's Luma, something like that. There's a bunch of them. They are all going to be flat like that. Flat in the front. There's not trying to control your foot, not trying to do this kind of thing with your foot. You have to find something like that because, I mean, look at how flat that is. And I don't know what they're talking about with tripping on things. I've never actually had that happen. I guess if you get the wrong size, I would think that would be the reason that you do it. Anyway, I'll put a link down below. Check them out. If you like it, great. If not, whatever. I have tried Vivo barefoot. That's the only other barefoot that I've tried. No, I've tried Luna sandals too. So I had Luna sandals, and I don't even know where those are. And I've tried Vivo. The Vivo, I thought the quality was crap, but a lot of people swear by them. And so it's up to you. But anyways, that's the last thing I wanted to say. And we're back. So again, this was not a sponsored video by any means. This is just a video that I know had to be made because I as I'm like correcting myself and noticing things in myself and noticing, you know, like that cross that I mentioned, and once everything's moving and the digestion is so much better, I notice this stuff in other people, and I know what they've got to be going through. Some people even like drag one of their legs around, or that, you know, they're all over the place. I mean, I kind of just keep things light, you know, like when I'm on my feet, but I have noticed a lot of this, and I really I got to get these videos out there because I can just see, and the padding in these shoes is getting worse and worse and worse and worse. It's like, and I see these people, and they struggle even to walk in these huge padded shoes. And I'm like, wow, this is getting crazier and crazy. And you can see their posture's worse and worse and worse and worse. So anyway, hopefully the video did you some good. I think this is probably a shareable video, but I think they all are. Anyway, comments, questions down below. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you in the next video.